Hey guys, welcome everyone to NYC on Rails Junior Developer Panel. Thanks so much for coming, really excited about the turnout. I'm Aiden Feldman. I put together the panel. I work at a startup called Jux.com, doing full stack development. I also run Hacker Hours, which is organized through this meetup, and teach at NYU. So yeah, really excited to have this group of people here, both in the audience and up here. Huge thanks to Pivotal, specifically Josh Knowles and Chrissy DeVito for hosting. They're providing the drinks and the snacks, which you're welcome to. So yeah, maybe a big round of applause for them. So yeah, I'll just pass the mic down and let the rest of the panel introduce themselves. The format is going to be, I have a list of questions I'm going to go through. Feel free to shoot up your hand during the discussion. If you have something to add or you have a clarifying question. New questions, we're going to leave time for at the end, if that makes sense. Okay. So,
Hey everybody, thank you for coming. Thanks Aiden for organizing this. I'm Avi Flumbaum. I've been working in the New York tech scene for like 13 years, since I was like 15. I taught myself how to code when I was like 11, I think is when I started. Dropped out of college, I worked at a hedge fund, and I started a company called Designer Pages, which grew to a team of like 13. So I've hired and trained a bunch of developers, and for the last year and a half, actually, I've just been teaching through Skillshare and General Assembly. And now I'm starting my own school to create more programmers. So that's me.
Hey, I'm Jeff Baird. I'm a junior developer at Metavo. And I actually just moved up to New York in July. And starting in this February, I hadn't ever written a line of code. So that's why I'm here. Taught myself to code in about 6 months and then got a position as a junior developer.
Hi, I'm Debbie Madden. I'm the Executive Vice President at Cyrus Innovation. We're an agile software consulting firm. And I've been hiring developers for 16 years, and I am going to be 20 for the rest of my life, so I've been doing this since I was 4. And thought I'd share some experience with you all.
I'm Dan Langevin. I'm the CTO of LifeBooker, and we hire junior developers, and I also am a self-taught programmer. I started, I guess, a year or two out of college, so I'm excited to be here to tell you guys about how we hire and what I did my own experience.
Hi, my name is Pedro Ojeda. I'm a software developer. I've been doing it for about 15 years professionally. But I started when I was in elementary school, just having around. Right now I'm teaching at NYU, but also do freelance working right now at CNBC. Before I was working at personal.com. I was a manager of presentation architecture, which is one of the front-end side of JavaScript and that stuff. And I've been doing a lot of interviews as well in that position.
Great. Can everyone hear okay? Yeah, good. All right. So just to get a little insight on who's here, raise your hand if you do not have like a traditional CS background, like a CS degree. Awesome. So how many people have been coding for less than 6 months? Okay, 6 months to a year? Maybe 1 to 2 years? More than 2 years? Cool. Who here works at a company that is actively or is considering hiring junior developers? Great, so those are the people that you're going to hunt down later, right? Cool. All right, so let's get started. What is the difference between a junior and a senior developer? Just to sort of lay out what this panel is about. What's the difference between a junior and a senior developer in terms of expectations or the responsibility that they're given?
Well, for us, the main difference is the expectation that they're going to have some oversight of the architecture of what they're working on. A more senior developer, and just I'll start off by saying that we typically will pair a junior person with a senior person. And the senior person will be responsible more for the architecture, not system architecture, but just like how this particular part of the program is going to work. And the junior developer is more responsible for implementation, sticking to the standards we set, but without having as much responsibility for the big picture.
So do you, like, how are the tasks normally assigned? Is it usually like spec'd out by someone who is more senior and then handed off to a junior developer, or how does that process happen?
So we'll usually, at the beginning of, say, a larger project, we'll work, the more senior developers will work together to come up with the basic outline of how we want it to work, and then we'll pair with the more junior developers to implement.
Why would a company be interested in hiring someone without a lot of experience? You know, what's the incentive for them?
So I think I'm really excited that I got the mic on this question. Because at Cyrus we have about 40 developers. And in our experience, there's two types of roles that I would consider junior developers. The first is someone that is straight out of school. And the second category is what I consider someone that's a career switcher. Someone that may have worked in sysadmin or tech support or IT. And the reason why I'm interested in bringing both of these types of junior developers into our environment is because it's important that we create well-rounded, cross-functional in terms of experience and backgrounds and views of the world in one team. And without career switchers and juniors right out of college, you really miss out on that richness. So we've really seen junior developers from school and folks that have been in IT and sysadmin for up to 5-10 years really excel within our teams and often provide viewpoints that are different than someone that's been coding for 5-10 years.
So the junior developer term is maybe a bit vague even. Distinguishing between someone who's like a recent grad, an entry level developer versus someone who is a switcher a career switcher who is coming in without any prior resume type experience.
Right.
When you're looking to hire, when you're in discussions with that kind of person, what do you set the same bar? Is it how are those expectations set?
Well, our interview process, we take all levels through the same essential process, and you have to, it's like an elimination. So if you don't pass one round, you don't get on to the next, regardless if you've been doing this for 20 years or if it's your first job you're trying to get. For people that have been working in IT or maybe a non-technical field or some straight out of school, we do hold the same expectations because this is their first job coding, and we're looking in this case for capacity to learn more so than knowledge or experience. And we interview both of those types of candidates for capacity to learn very strongly.
So I guess that leads into the next round of questions, which is that capacity to learn versus experience. Dan, do you guys, I guess, going into interview for a position like that, I think, I guess how can someone demonstrate that capacity to learn? Is it sort of an intrinsic personality thing, or is it, showing, what maybe would you look for on a resume to just, what would get you interested in someone who maybe doesn't have a CS degree or certification or something like that?
Well, I think that seeing something that they have worked on, if like a GitHub page, some projects that they've worked on, shows me that they're going to take initiative and that they're teaching themselves, regardless of really the quality of it at that point. It just shows that they have the right attitude at least. And then in an interview, I'll throw in some questions that are more like logic problems than programming problems, to see how the person thinks outside the context of this very specific task that they would actually be doing. And I think that gives a little bit more insight for somebody who is less experienced.
So what sort of does the technical questions that you might ask, does that vary based on the level of skill that you might expect that person to have, or do you gear the interview more towards I believe that they're at this level, so we'll start with this sort of round of questioning just from there?
So for us, it doesn't really. It's similar to what Debbie was saying, that it is basically the same interview for everybody, and that you might get further in the task that we do if you have more experience, and the expectations are slightly different depending on what position it is that you were interviewing for, junior versus senior. But it is actually the same task, and taking them through a kind of basic problem, sort of like doing some test work and stuff, seeing how they pick that up, seeing if I explain to them, this, I do sort of like, we take them through a basic example of it. Can they reproduce that? They can take the next step.
So are you actually doing coding in an interview, or for someone who doesn't have much experience?
Yeah, still doing coding in an interview.
Yeah.
So when I was up in New York looking for a job, I did about 15 job interviews in 5 days. One thing I found was that you might be like offered a technical question that you don't know the answer to, or a coding exercise that you have no idea how to complete. When I interviewed at Pivotal, they had me code in Java. I'd never touched a line of Java in my life. But I was really excited to be able to learn from these people that I was interviewing from, and I think that was something that was impressive to prospective employers. So I learned more in that 5 days than I had in a long time about programming. So I think that the impression that you can make by being excited to get knowledge out of the interview and not necessarily panic that you don't know the information is something valuable to go into the interviews with.
I think that in talking to a lot of junior developers after they go to interviews about what works and what doesn't, and then talking to hiring managers about what they're looking for, one of the things I think throws off junior developers during interviews is that when they're asked a technical question, they're operating under the assumption that the desire is to get the right answer, and that's just a total fallacy. Of course we want you to know the answer to the question. That's what every candidate that's applying this job has. They know the answer to the question, they can answer it correctly. As a junior developer, during an interview, I think it's your job not to answer the question, but to ask about the problem and learn as much as possible about the problem and have a conversation with them about, one of the sample questions I heard someone ask was, we have a really popular website in the US and we're about to open to the Asia markets. How would you scale the website? There is no one-sentence answer to that question. That is not enough information at all to answer that. In addition, I don't even know if there's an agreed upon right strategy for that question. There's like 100 different things I can think about to answer that question. Any developer who's like, oh, I would shard those databases without asking, what does your database setup currently look like? Or, index, where's the optimization? Have you, stress tested it? That's what we want when we ask questions, technical questions. We're not just looking for you to give an answer. That's what every candidate should be able to do, is answer the question correctly. We're asking to see, how do you explore the problem? What questions do you ask? What are you trying to learn? What's it like trying to collaborate with you? If you just give an answer, you're giving the interviewer nothing to go on. You just put yourself in the exact same box as every other candidate. So that's kind of one thing that I think you probably learned also.
So there's that, again, that line of, how much experience is just enough. It seems like there's a threshold that, maybe they don't have to know Java to, pass an interview. Maybe they don't have to know, the stack that you're using exactly. You can find someone who has never done any programming that shows a capacity to learn that, could probably be trained as a programmer. What's that level, that sort of minimum point at which, either for the hiring people, for the teaching people, for Jeff, where's that line where you felt competent enough, or you felt that someone else was competent enough to, in that domain, to be able to be hired?
I mean, the threshold for me was that I was broke and I needed a job.
It quite depends on the position, on the tasks that are at hand. For a more senior, you want to, you're looking for a lot more, for a more junior type of developer. You want to see what their portfolio is, what their past work is. If it shows that will fit within the constraint of the task, then if you have some portfolio they can show for some problems that you can work on that are similar to the task, that brings a lot of confidence. If you don't have a lot of past work, then you should prepare something. So on GitHub, post it, even questions, Stack Overflow, stuff like that.
One of the things that we do that's very effective to help us draw a very specific line, if you will, is we've had a take-home technical exercise to test knowledge, and it is open book, open internet. It's been the same exercise for 9 years, but 73% of people that take it don't pass it. So I don't know what the answer is on if there's a specific line that people show the developers, and the developers are the ones that evaluate this exercise. It's not a multiple choice question. It's you're writing code. It takes 4 or 5 hours to do, but there is some minimum level of technical based on your experience that we look for, that we get, only 20-some-odd% of the time.
And that's a hard cutoff.
Yes. Yeah. For us.
I guess it's kind of interesting because I spent the last month interviewing students for the school. So basically interviewing people who have no programming and no technical experience and trying to gauge whether or not I think, will this person can this person be a programmer, right? Which is kind of a weird question, right? What is it about a person that makes them a good programmer before they learn to programming? Is it like, oh, I'm good with machines and I speak computer? Because that isn't actually a quality that any good programmer has. So I guess, I spend a lot of time thinking about what makes people good programmers, or what gives people a natural inclination to be better at programming than someone who wouldn't. I definitely don't think that it's like math. And when I hear that colleges require you to take calculus to take computer science, I'm like, that's ridiculous. So I think that the quantitative threshold, how smart you need to be a programmer, is actually probably way lower than we think, than we're trained to think. So then what are the qualities that I think give people the ability to be a good programmer? And I think it's all about your ability to break problems down into smaller problems. Programming is managing complexity. Our programs, are 4,000 to-do steps that have to be executed in the exact right order, or else the program doesn't work. Machines are stupid, and we need to be able to write really, really simple instructions and thousands of them. So the hard part about programming is really about managing complexity. How do you take something really difficult, like responding to a web request, and make it easy? Not for the machine, but for the next person to work on this. And that's really all about breaking things into really small parts, and seeing that big things are composed of littler things, which is a little related to logic, or just your ability to kind of think and slow yourself down and really get, ask about the problem and figure out what the problem looks like, and see that, 2 parts of the problem relate to each other and I should solve those together. And then this part of the problem doesn't even need to be solved for a year. That's really what, those qualities is going to be what makes you able to be a good programmer. If I was interviewing a junior developer, I would really look for who I didn't expect to have tons of technical experience. The kinds of things I'd look for in the interview are their ability to kind of be logical and break things apart and make things into simple problems that then they could simply solve.
Oh, yeah.
I think there's a huge difference between a software engineer and a programmer. But the reason is I almost got a master's in computer science from City College, and one of the things that irritated me was looking at somebody else's code. It looked like the guy was doing his homework. In other words, it things like, use the same variables to mean different things, the same area of code, or use different variables to mean exactly the same thing. Your eyes would fit. I'm just looking at it.
So
I think if programmer is more like a hobbyist, and I just hate all hobbies. I mean, no discipline, no systematic approach. Nobody else can read the code. The guy gets hit by a truck, goodbye.
So the comment was that there's a big difference between someone who knows how to write programs and someone who is a software engineer. Someone who...
Because I've seen plenty of programmers that use software engineers.
So someone who can structure code well.
Yeah, I mean, somebody can structure the code so good that if you look at it, you know exactly what it's doing.
Right.
I mean, this thing is because you modify the code all the time. You don't have the time. I mean, if you get pushing the comments, these comments might get outdated very quickly, and then the comments get out of sync with the code. So you do write good code, you become self-implementing, and you get yourself a lot of headaches.
Yeah.
There's a really awesome Kent Beck quote where he says that any human can write programs for a machine. Only coders can write programs for people.
And you write for people.
Exactly. We're not writing for machines, we're writing for each other.
Yeah, the machine doesn't give a shit. The program has to read it.
Yeah.
I'm curious about something. There seems to be a lot of opportunities for junior and intermediate and senior code developers. How can we assess places to work? The premise of the question so far has been how do we jump over the hoops of different companies that we might want to work for? How can we differentiate the multiple job offers that are coming our way?
So like so the question I think was what distinguishes like a junior from an intermediate from a senior?
Well, whatever level we happen to be at.
Okay.
We are going to be getting.
Well, how do you assess as an individual wanting to be?
Yeah, what should we look for in a coding house or a potential company to work for? As far as someone coming in who's never had.
In terms of the role or the company?
How can we tell where's a good place to work?
How can we tell where's a good place to work?
So, I don't know, are a lot of you guys members of NYCRB? Okay, well, I got my whole start sending out an email to the mailing list for the meetup group for New York City Ruby. And in like 18 hours, I had 40 responses. So I understand what you mean. Like, how do you sift through that to find out the people who are, one, serious for the job, or serious what they offer, and two, would also be a good fit for you. Especially with someone like me, I had very specific requirements. I needed a place to learn. I needed a place that understood really where I was with my skill level. So I think that's a big problem. My strategy was I set up Skype interviews with almost every single one of them. So over the course of like 5 or 6 days, I had like 35 Skype interviews. And I narrowed it down from there. So we're in a very nice position as developers that we're like more in the seat of power when we're being hired. So I got to narrow it down from there. And then, so when I flew up to New York to interview, I narrowed it down from like 35 to 15, just on a gut instinct on a 20-minute conversation. Those 15, I went into the office, and like my immediate thing was like, do I feel at home here? Are the people great? Do they seem to really understand where I am? Like if someone hadn't looked at my GitHub profile, I didn't even, give them the time of day, because it's like I'm a brand new programmer, and you don't know where I stand. So I think you have to narrow it down and then actually go to the office and see if you're going to be a good fit.
It's definitely important to remember that you're interviewing the company as well. When you're going in to meet them, whether it's a formal interview or just casual discussion, it's discovering more about them as well, as much as them coming to you.
So one thing that I would recommend is to list for yourself what success would look like 3, 6, and 12 months down the road, once from the day you start at the company, and also what your elimination factors are. And it might be location. Jack, I heard you say, I knew what I wanted going in, right? You knew your success and your elimination factors, and that helped you. You had a guideline before it became emotional, and then you used the emotional factor of, do I fit in here, once you showed up. But if you need to be, in 12 months from now, able to write production code, running a project, pair programming, then you essentially do a game, and you can filter out a subset very simply once you have that, if it's like a very beforehand. Like if you're looking for an apartment in Manhattan, well, I can only spend X on rent, so that eliminates a, elimination factor. I need X to live. Well, that eliminates. That works very well for both people that are looking to hire. I advise them to do that to create their job description, and as you're looking for a job, you do that, and hopefully match.
Is anyone employable as a programmer? Like, can any person off the street, given X amount of time, be trained to a level where they're employable? I mean, I sort of want to hear from everyone on this.
Anyone?
Like anyone.
Well, some people are not willing to, unless they have the desire to learn. They have to have a really strong desire. Some people are not, they're less of the logical type, more creative type, very creative type, extremely creative. But the logical step might not be there. For some people, it might be much harder. But the desire has to be there. If it's not there, it's going to be very tough transition.
What if the will is there?
I think it's possible. Unless you have the will and the right context, I think it's possible.
I would say that people have to have a certain level of ability to communicate, a certain level of empathy to be a really good programmer. Because, like this gentleman's question or statement about, the difference between software engineers and programmers. You're writing your code for someone else to read. So maybe anyone can write a program that works, but is anyone employable as a programmer? I think you have to be able to communicate effectively and be at a certain threshold, intelligence. But I don't think it's as high as some people hold it up to be.
I would basically agree with that. Most anybody could write a program, but it definitely does. There is a skill level required to be a software engineer that not everybody's going to have, and then the desire, I think, is a big part of that also. That you have to really care about what you're producing, the work you're producing, and care enough to realize that other people are going to have to read it. That's sort of the difference we were talking about earlier. But yeah, I don't think that just anybody can.
For a program, you have to really love it. Just going for the job, then it's going to be very hard. It's not going to work out. You really have to love program to get it to the program.
I will go on record and say that I am 100% unemployable as a developer. That's all I have to say.
I think that, if you really want to do this, if you have the will and, you got grit and you're not going to stop, you're going to be able to do it. One thing you have to realize is that the mechanics of a language are the easy part. That's what they said. It's that you have to be communicative, and you have to be able to write clear code and deploy things on time. And there's so many other aspects to programming that the mechanics of a language, understanding how to define a method, that's the easy part. You have your whole life to understand that. But things you need to be able to do right away are not give up, not get frustrated, not get angry, not get too attached to your first solution. Those are really philosophical and hard things for us to do. Part of being a programmer is just accepting that every day you have to be better. You have to keep on learning and keep on pushing yourself and always be at the edge of your knowledge and always be uncomfortable learning new things. That's the hard part of being a programmer, and that's where why you need grit to get through it. You'll eventually learn to speak the languages. Just like, you drop someone, in a country where they don't speak the native language and you leave them there for 4 or 5 years, they'll eventually get it. But they're not going to necessarily be a better person. Part of being a programmer means that you're committing to just always spending the rest of your life just trying to be better every day. Write better code, make it faster. And that's, I think, the hard part.
It's pretty much, I agree with that comment, unless you go into more governmental type work.
I wish I looked at the quote beforehand, but the 10,000 hours, is that from programmer? Or?
No, that's from
So, is that
That's outliers. It's just the average person needs 10,000 hours of practice to be a master. I don't know.
okay. Does anyone agree? Well, maybe we'll leave it at that.
I'm a lazy one. I'm very passionate about two things. One is getting the job done with the least amount of work. That means that if I can reuse objects, I'll kill anything else. I know the code that has been tested, I will reuse it without a single thought. And two, deliver on time and then get the hell out well before the sun sets. So, we'll be happy having you around.
So, was that a question at the end?
Yeah, would you be happy having
Would you be happy with?
No, would you be happy with having somebody like me?
So, would you be happy having someone who wants,
Someone who is passionate about getting the job done with the least amount of work.
who's passionate about getting the job done with the least amount of work,
Deliver the job on time and then get home before the sunset.
delivering the job on time and getting it done quickly?
That's the only thing three things I feel passionate.
One of the books I read while I was learning was Pragmatic Programmer's Guide, Journeyman to Master. I don't remember the whole title. But I think one of the things in that book that struck me when I was learning to code is that you're actually endeavoring to write like the minimum amount of code possible. Writing code is a bad thing. Like, as much as we love programming and we want to program every solution, that we are actually looking for ways to write less code. And one of the most difficult things I found with learning was being comfortable deleting code that didn't need to be there anymore. For the first 2 months of learning, I wanted to comment everything out in case I needed it later. But you definitely want to get comfortable deleting your code. Anyway, yes, to answer your question.
Great. So good segue, actually. So, running hacker hours, I deal with a lot of people who are in this audience, but also who are, have gone through intro tutorials, books, online classes, in-person classes, whatever, and want to be doing this working full time as a job, as a career. What was your path for doing that? And maybe Dan, what are the sort of routes you see for making that jump to, maybe advanced beginner to someone who has a job doing this program?
I'm not really sure how to answer that question other than work your ass off.
What was your path?
My path was pretty much I picked up some books and I joined the Tampa Ruby group, which is where I'm from, Tampa, Florida. And I wrote code every day. I pushed it up to GitHub. I made it all public. I blogged about everything I did and solicited help from as many people as I could get help from. I pair programmed with guys that have been doing this for a decade or longer. In the case of one of my mentors, I was basically just really enthusiastic, asked for help every chance I had. Went to some Ruby conferences and other tech conferences and met other Ruby developers. I listened to every episode of the Ruby Rogues in 3 weeks. So at the time there was 57 of them. And I listened to every single one on double time while I did my morning runs. Just because my philosophy behind that was programmers immersion, people who learn language by going to a country. I was determined to learn a programming language by immersing myself in the culture. So I went to all the meetup groups, I listened to all the podcasts. I wanted to learn how to talk like a developer so that, when I went into the interviews, I might not have known how to answer every question they asked me. I knew what they were talking about. I knew enough to say, I don't know this, but here are the questions I have to learn this. So, I don't know, just immerse yourself. Love what you're doing and do it all the time.
So my path was actually a little bit different. Similar in some ways, but I was actually working in web marketing. And the way that I even found out that I liked programming was by not having much of a budget to work with and coming up with different kind of pages and just whatever I could do to accomplish what I needed to. And from there, I actually started taking on side projects. I did like consulting like for some small businesses that built websites, and I find that I learn a lot better when I'm working on something that has like a real world application. So that was kind of the approach that I took, and then along the way, I studied a lot. I did a lot of the things that you're talking about. But for me, it was really helpful to have like a specific product that I was working on, and that also built a portfolio for me, so that when I went to get my first programming job, I had stuff that I could show. And then in addition, I did some other kind of like, more just kind of like flashier looking stuff that I could show in an interview. But that was what I did.
Just to follow up on that, I completely agree. You have to like build something with a real world application, or at least something that is going to be looked at by other people and usable. In Tampa, we had something called Coder Night, where they would send out like a puzzle from like Puzzle Node or Ruby Quiz or something like that, and we would work on it all week, and then at the end of the week, we'd all get together, project all the submissions up onto the wall, and we'd go through pretty much line by line and analyze each other's code. And I was definitely the most junior person there, but there was a whole range of skill levels. My first program I submitted was a series of put statements that printed out a ASCII Ruby, and that was like my solution to the puzzle. And their response was, "Is someone trolling us?" I did that just to get into the meeting, and then went to everyone after that, and like paired with some of the guys. Sometimes I sent in like 3 solutions, and paired with one of the guys, did one of my own. And anytime you get a chance to write code, write code.
So one thing that I would be remiss if I didn't mention was we actually have 2 people in this room that have lived this path, our Cyrus developers. And there's Steve in the back and Matt over here who's on his journey right now. And 2 of the things that both of them had in common is they both took one of Avi's Skillshare courses, which was really amazing because they were able to do a lot of things in their career during the day, and then at nights, what was it, Monday nights or something like that? Monday nights, they were able to get together with a group of like-minded people, like all of us, that really had this passion and made up their mind, I want to do this, and really give themselves that chance to do these real-world experiences with like-minded people, but also, make a living and have a job during the day. And both of them also now have their own Ruby meetup for beginners, which again gives them another chance every month to surround themselves with like-minded people. Listen, we're all newbies here. We're going to learn how to code together. No pressure, no expectations. And that experience for them, you guys can ask about it yourselves, but I believe it's been invaluable for them as a learning tool and a path to becoming developers.
I just want to, so when I started learning how to program, it was all web development. It was like HTML and CSS. It was probably like 95 or something, 96. And it was really just about like, I'd gone onto the internet for the first time. I was like, these websites are really cool. I want to make one. Mostly because I wanted to be a writer, and I wanted like no one's going to publish my stories. I'll publish them myself. So I taught myself HTML and CSS, and then I made my elementary school's website. And when I got to high school, I made my high school's website. Then eventually, managing my own stories in single HTML files was becoming really difficult. Once you publish 100 stories and you want to update your navigation, hard coding 100 links becomes, pretty hard. And then you tried Dreamweaver for like a second, or at least I did, and I was like, no, this isn't right. Databases, that's what's next. And I remember I learned how to, in ASP and PHP, I connected a database, and I redid my blog and made it dynamic. And that's kind of when I started really being able to get jobs. And the first time I went to a job interview, I was probably like 15, and they asked me, oh, what can you do? Lied. Just, yeah, sure, I can do that. I have plenty of experience with, SQL. For some reason they hired me. I mean, I was charging like $8 an hour, so I guess it was, a summer job. They didn't have anything to lose. And I just learned, you do it, you make it up, you just hack your way through it, and you just get through it. And every subsequent job I ever got in was, I was totally not qualified to be the CTO of a hedge fund at 21, I promise. And I remember when I started working there, like the first 6 months, I was in so over my head. I knew about databases, but I didn't know anything about database normalization, so I was creating all this duplicate financial data in my database. That's not good, you don't want to do that. But I remember I was at this hedge fund, and I was working like 12 hours a day for like 4 months, and it was like, I was just, I didn't have any friends, all I did was work, all I did was code, and I'd never been happier. And that was kind of the moment when it clicked that like, oh, this isn't just a means to an end. Programming is not just about like writing stories and building websites and having like side jobs and like, making money. I must, if I'm happy and I'm working this hard, I must really love this. And if I really love this, I need to do it way better. I need to become like really professional about it. Like I didn't know anything about version control. I'd written like all this financial software and had never checked it into any repository. And like the more I found the deficiencies and like what I didn't know, and I didn't have any mentors, and I didn't know where to even start. You just do it. You just work your ass off and like find the answers. I think that there are easier ways today to learn how to code, and you guys are lucky. You don't have to go down that like walk on a pole, path. So that's great. Like code. I remember learning on WebMonkey, and now we have like Code Academy and like Code School and Treehouse, which are so much better. But just learn everything you can, immerse yourselves in it, and then just build. Find a project, put it online, make it open source, post it to Hacker News, get some comments, and just build things. That's, no one's going to look at where you went to college if you can show them what you've built and what contributions you've made to the community.
Yeah, just a couple follow-ups. I think learning by osmosis is great. Go to meetups that you will not understand, like just hearing the jargon, hearing how other people talk about these things is going to be hugely beneficial. And then also learning out of necessity. I think if you can get pro bono work, doing I built a WordPress site. I did have a CS degree, but I still felt like I didn't know what I was doing in terms of web development. And doing sites for like $100 for like a family friend, that kind of thing. Best and actually really good advice I've heard recently is find a nonprofit that you're interested in. They don't have money. They probably don't have a tight time schedule, and they would be more than happy to give you hand over the keys to their site to let you add comments or whatever it is that's needed, and that's going to force you to learn working with APIs or whatever SQL, things that you maybe wouldn't have if you just sort of kept on going along doing the tutorials or the whatever. Yeah.
From my point of view, the whole point of working smart is to avoid having to work hard. I would work hard and many semesters as well, so I'm totally out of options. And then I did it, but then I feel the pain. But then I know that I have to do it or die, and I hate that. So that's the way.
So Avi runs for those not familiar, runs a program called Flatiron School, which I think is starting next month, October 2nd. Yeah. So that's a full-time training course for new programmers. For someone hiring, how do you sort of compare, seeing if you get a resume that has a CS degree versus someone who's been through, Dev Bootcamp or Flatiron School or something like that, versus someone who says, I'm completely self-trained and I'm super awesome. How do you, what sort of follow-up questions do you ask? How do you then, gauge skill level, gauge whether they're, employable as the, sort of entry-level trained kind of person, or someone who's junior, not really expecting a lot of experience?
Everyone's looking at me, why? So, the top two things that I look for, regardless of where you went to school, what your GPA was, how much you have on GitHub, how much you have on Stack Overflow, and all these other wonderful things that are also very important. The most important thing for me is integrity. I need to surround myself with honest people. Because at the end of the day, when you assemble people that really care and really genuine and really care about what they're doing, I really believe the rest will work out. And Integrity is my number one for every single person that I ever have interviewed. And number two is motivation. Going back to what Jeff said, it's like you interviewed people that you really wanted to work with. You were motivated to work with a specific, specific companies. And you guys would be surprised how many people come in and interview and want a job and literally don't know anything about where they are. Don't know the name of the company they're interviewing, don't know the position, don't know anything about the history of the company. People that are interviewing and being interviewed have to do their homework both ways. We want both people to be passionate and honest. So I use that across the board for everybody.
I'll add actually that we've been doing some interviewing at Jux recently, and we had someone come in who wasn't super experienced, but knew who I was, my projects on GitHub, referenced, oh, that was really cool that you built this, or I saw that you're having problems with this or whatever, and knew about our stack from blog posts we've written and these sorts of things. And it was really that just demonstrated a level of excitement, of enthusiasm, like we were talking about earlier. That that's not directly showing aptitude for coding. But it's showing that that person is willing to put a lot of time in, a lot of effort into whatever they're doing. So that was really encouraging to see. All right. We ended up going with someone else.
There's a certain minimum level of the technical interviewing questions should be the same for all, beginner, non-programmer, non-computer science, computer science. The same questions should be applied to all candidates. You have to be technically qualified to answer these technical questions. They're not really hard questions, but you have to know the subject, HTML, CSS, whatever it is. So you have to study your material, you have to understand to compete against all these other computer science people. Especially for web development, computer science is not a great major for web development because they don't really teach you about HTML, CSS, or JavaScript. They just teach you about other stuff that has nothing to do with web development. So you have you're at the same starting point as these computer science people. And once you go to an interview, find out what you knew, what you did well, what you didn't do as well, and don't be afraid of failing because you can always go back, learn whatever you didn't know, and even go back to the same company if it's just the company that you like. Just get to know what is really required and where you really want to go, and keep trying.
How many of you guys are familiar with FizzBuzz? All right. People still do that during interviews. During the 15 interviews, I think I was asked to do FizzBuzz 4 or 5 times. So learn how to do FizzBuzz. And in every interview, I did it a different way. So I thought I just had fun with it. Before I came out to New York, I figured out 15 different ways to implement FizzBuzz in 3 different languages. So it was, so definitely learn how to do FizzBuzz because people still ask that.
Awesome. And with that, let's open up to some questions.
So if I know FizzBuzz, can I get a job? Does it work like that?
I don't think I got an offer from any of the companies that asked me for FizzBuzz. I don't think it was because of my answer. I think it was more because one of them was a node shop, and I just had no interest in looking for a node shop.
Your Facebook was the greatest.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. So no, the question is no. You need to know more than FizzBuzz, but it's a good thing to know because it is asked.
Yeah, I think that's with FizzBuzz. I think FizzBuzz represents the bare minimum quantitative ability you need to be a programmer. If you can solve FizzBuzz, you probably have enough of a brain to be a good programmer. I think it's cooler than being able to answer FizzBuzz in an interview is knowing the history of FizzBuzz and knowing what Jeff Atwood and all the great programmers say about FizzBuzz because it's like the stairway of heaven with programmers. You should, it's part of our culture. It's FizzBuzz. Come on.
Can you comment you're training someone, taking from a beginner to an advanced beginner to an intermediate, there's more elegant code and less elegant code, but are there things that just aren't obvious to the self-taught person that when they start interacting with the marketplace and all those pressures, will really increase productivity?
So the question was, for a new developer, understanding, the things that you learn from sort of working on your own to building real production code.
Yeah, I mean.
And what's the training that maybe goes into that?
Sure, some things that you're teaching them, some things that people just left to their own devices working for the nonprofit with no time pressure just aren't thinking about, that suddenly you need to think about as soon as you're dealing with hedge funds and markets and time pressure, things like that.
So what are the things that you'll only pick up by having a real coding job with other coders?
I think the mess that can happen from trying to share code between developers, Git is really easy to use alone. When you have a team of 10 working on 40 different feature branches, it gets really hard, it gets tough, which is why don't let yourself use Git alone in the way that, don't be messy. Pretend you do have a team. I have 3 GitHub accounts and constantly collaborate with myself in order to get my Git workflow down and issue pull requests from forks of my own repositories just to really get that process down. I think Git is tough to teach, learning really how to collaborate, not, because the worst thing you can do on a team of programmers is when you break someone else's code that they just wrote, when you overwrite someone's changes, when you get merge, you leave conflict errors and commit those back into master, people are not going to be happy about that. You really upset people. So understanding how to collaborate with other people's code is important. It's hard to learn on your own. You gotta fake it. And then it's really hard to simulate a web traffic and optimization. You can build all the Twitter clones you want and have all the N+1 problems and never ever notice it. And I would say, and I've done this too, Breakout, there's a tool by Apache called HTTP perf that can simulate web traffic and load. Take your sample blog and run it against 10,000 requests a minute and figure out how to make it not crash. You got to give yourself that problem if you want to understand scale. You can't fake scaling problems if you're not trying to.
I have to second the collaboration part. It's much different working with a team. Also, learn how to write really awesome tests. I think the first 3 weeks I was at Metabo, I think all I wrote were tests, along with some Qbot scripts, but that's a different story. I'm going to go off just a little bit. I think having a junior programmer on the team can also help the rest of the team learn as well. So you never learn something as well as you do when you're teaching it. So having someone to teach on the team, I think makes everyone better. So that's not necessarily something that is tough for that you learn when you get a job. But I think it's always a good thing to look for in a company is a place where they encourage teaching and learning and growing at every level, not just at the beginning.
So I'm often on the side of the user, and one thing that I see junior developers that have, probably one of the steepest learning curves that I witness is how to work in a team environment with either clients or business users and really understand how to, you're crafting a code from someone's verbal, I want this beautiful thing and I want to click on it and someone buys something. They don't, I've issued many user requirements and I really have no idea what I'm saying, right? And a lot of people don't know until you see it. So writing the code, I agree with everything everyone said, but also really understanding how to work with the person that you're building the product for and understanding how to craft what they're asking for when they themselves don't even really know.
Where there's empathy, you said before. As a programmer, you just need to be able to put yourself in their shoes and really live their life and understand what their requirements are and just be empathic that's your responsibility.
So another quick book recommendation, if you haven't read Pragmatic Thinking and Learning, go read it. It talks about empathy, and one of the things it says is that not only to put yourself in the shoes of the user, like turn it on your head and think about how they're going to use it, have empathy in that respect, but also have empathy for the machine that you're working with, and like think about how it's going to approach the problem that you're giving it to solve. So, anyway, sorry, that's a tangent.
Are companies willing to hire developers with no good communication?
Say the last part again?
If are companies willing to hire developers with no good communication?
So,
Are they willing to hire people without good communication?
oh, I see. So for a company that's hiring, is it a problem if the person that they're hiring doesn't have good communication skills? Do you mean specifically like?
I
Can you
mean,
clarify?
for example, if I'm a good web developer,
Yeah.
are companies to hire good developers without good communication? I mean, with people that doesn't speak good English or
So you mean specifically language barriers?
yeah.
I see. Okay. Well, yeah, working across language barriers. Does anyone have experience in that? So I mean, it's very common these days for companies, because there is such a shortage of developers around here. It's very common for companies to be working with outsourced contractors. So I think it's maybe even more common than it used to be that's going to come into play. Face-to-face obviously makes things a lot easier than having to communicate over a phone or video chat or something like that. Yeah, I mean, it's an additional challenge, of course. I don't know that it would necessarily rule, I don't think it rules out any place.
I think it depends a lot on the environment. If you're set up well to handle communication issues, especially if you can tend towards written communication, that can be easier. But you have to, it depends a lot on the environment. You have to have the expectation, the company has to have it set up so that to minimize the impact of communication barriers.
In the green in the back?
I think like any company who's hiring a junior developer is probably facing some kind of scalability problems. So do you suggest that we learn how to scale an app before we even apply to these junior jobs, or
You mean scalability in terms of like web traffic,
server
that kind of thing?
yeah, requests?
Not necessarily. I'd say not necessarily.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't expect a junior developer to be able to scale a web application.
It's something that's really hard to. I mean, you can do some things to sort of simulate it, but
Even
it's
then, it's not. You're not. They have scalability is like you need a real world situation because it's really about the problem, and it's not like there is if you're having scalability issues, press F11. There's no answer.
yeah. I would not make that a priority.
Actually, I have a similar question to the one earlier asked. So I know a lot of comments have been about doing like pair programming, and I guess when we're starting out, people have almost a luxury of coding with someone 24/7. So do you guys have any suggestions for how we might be able to go about that? Like if it is through like remote means or just other ways that we can still try to almost simulate that or do some sort of collaborative, experience. Have a structured place to go code all the time.
I mean, if you're living in the tri-state area, you should be able to go meet someone who wants to learn how to code in a coffee shop and code with them. When I started learning Ruby, I didn't know Ruby, I wanted to learn it. I knew JavaScript, I was kind of in the jQuery community, and someone I knew from jQuery land, he was learning Ruby around the same time, and I was like, hey, why don't we just start hanging out on Sundays, like I'll bring bagels over, and we'll start teaching each other Ruby. That person turned out to be Huda Katz, and so you get, I don't buy it that you need to like Skype and pair with someone. We live in like the tri-state area, like find a coder, there's hacker hours, they meet twice a week now. Go work with people. There's no excuse for not getting the experience to pair and finding mentors and sharing code.
Yeah, there's people everywhere. All you have to do is ask. The Ruby community is awesome. It's one of the big things. So I was between Python and Ruby And pretty much the differentiation for me was people in the Ruby community actively like went out, sought me, and said, "Come program with me." And I sat down with them, paired, and then I got into Ruby. So it's out there. You literally just go to a group, ask somebody, sit down. Like 85% to 90% of people will be like, "Sure, come sit down with me. Let's work on a problem together." I actually have never been turned down, so maybe 100%. I don't know.
Hackathons are a great place also that, you are in a team, you are working on some problem, you're under tight deadlines. Like that's a huge experience for people. I think.
Yeah. So, for those of us lucky enough to like maybe be teaching undergrads or something, like, you said that you came out with a CS degree and you barely knew anything about this. What are like the top 5 things that we should be teaching undergrads about this? Because it seems like everybody, like all the clique problems and all the stuff that you learn in CS undergrad, they're not really serving this market at all.
Okay, so maybe how could undergrad curriculum be changed to better accommodate the needs of the market right now? Pedro, you want to come?
It's a very challenging question. Depends. I guess universities have a very traditional curricula. It takes a lot of time and effort to change those curricula, and the professors are well established. So it's going to be hard to change the programs in universities. It just takes time. It's so much effort to just change one course. We have to prepare like 1 year in advance all these courses and stuff like that. It's possible, but it requires a lot of support from upper management, like a real clear direction from the school. And it's really hard for the professor to push that agenda.
So I graduated from the University of South Florida with a degree in entrepreneurship, which is a brand new degree at USF. And I was, kind of tangentially involved in developing that curriculum. And just like Pedro said, it's very difficult to get a new curriculum passed. But one of the big things we focused on in that curriculum that actually was hugely influential in getting me into programming was the teaching someone how to learn, how to think creatively. We had this class called Innovation and Creativity or something like that. I don't remember the exact name. But pretty much we went in there and the only assignment of the class was to build a board game from scratch. Like we had like this one word that we had to go off of and build a board game and competitive. And we had to like pit people against each other and make it like a usable game. And if you think about it, that has a lot to do with programming. It's like you're taking a problem, you're breaking it down into pieces, and you're trying to make it a great user experience for somebody. So I think teaching someone how to learn and how to learn actively is probably the biggest asset they can have going into computer programming. Because none of us here have any idea what the world of computer science or programming is going to look like in 10 years. I mean, think about where we were 10 years ago. In 2002? Like, do you remember what websites looked like in 2002? I mean, the world changes so fast in this industry. So the ability to learn quickly and like apply yourself to learning, I think, is much more important than learning a specific language or object-oriented versus functional or dynamic or static or whatever like that.
So I think the worst thing colleges or universities can do is like chase hot languages. Like, oh, Ruby is really popular now. We need to introduce a Ruby on Rails course. Like, that's because, technology moves way too fast. You'll never keep up like that. I think it's a fundamental shift in approaching computer science, or at least because, look, there's high-level algorithm. If you're working on a Linux kernel, like, you need to know about memory heaps, like, it's high-level, really, really technical stuff. So that's maybe more in the computer science realm. Like in web development and application development, Objective-C, Ruby, Python, like a lot of that stuff's abstracted away and you can express yourself more easily. You don't necessarily need to get into, buffer management and stuff. But I think that universities need to approach like web development or application development, the way they approach like a creative writing workshop. Like in 3 months, you can learn everything there is to know about narrative structure and expression and literature. And then you're going to spend the next 4 years in college just writing with a group of people and reading their stories and talking about it. Just teach it like that. Put people in a room together and say, write some code, read it together, and that's it. Like we have to let go of this and say this isn't a science. There is no F11 to learn how to code. Like you can't do, let's do a class on algorithms, a class on data structures, and a class on Ruby, and there we go, programmers. Like that's not going to work. It's about expressing ourselves and like understanding ideas and breaking things down. Those are hard skills to quantify, and like there's no textbook. I'm like, hey, here's how to be passionate and smart. Like, you have to do that through actually working with each other and through trying to express yourselves and reading and understanding how to critique someone else's code without like making them cry. Those are. I wish that there was like a computer science like workshop in like college, and it wasn't like a 2-hour lecture on like data management or like algorithms or stuff. Like I wish it was just like my creative writing workshops were. 2 hours, we're gonna all bring in a story of minimum length on a certain theme, and we're just gonna read it together and talk about it, and that's it.
All right, maybe 2 sort of quick questions.
What's a good portfolio look like? And as a sub-question, what's the best one you've seen?
What's a good portfolio look like, and what's the best one you've seen? So I certainly when I'm looking at people that are coming and applying for a job, variety is really good. If they've done a few like Rails apps that they've like scaffolded and like put Twitter Bootstrap on, like that's not as compelling as they've tried to write a jQuery plugin, they've tried to build a sort of form-based whatever app, and then they've also done some more gone through Ruby codes or whatever, like that they've done some more algorithmic type of things, that they know SQL or like these kinds of things. It's it can mean more than one language, but also it's like doing different sorts of projects, not just sort of rehashing the same, getting a sort of bare bones app up 5 times.
I can't speak to like the second part of your question, but as far as the comments I got on my GitHub profile, I got 2. Most frequently was that I wrote idiomatic, elegant code. Even though I was a beginner, I guess that was something that was very attractive to future employees, and that I tested everything. And I like looking back at my code, I think it's awful now. Here's 4 months later, or whatever it is. But those were the 2 comments I got, so I think those are maybe good things to focus on.
Custom components, especially web work, you can do a lot of creative stuff, visualization stuff, more art type work. Since they are different than the standard, I have a form, I have a post. No, you want to differentiate a little bit and have something more of your own creativity. And on the web, you can do anything now, with HTML5, JavaScript. You can create games, you can create interactive. Since that showed that you can actually program, and you can actually show some creative thinking.
Great, maybe one more quick question.
Can you guys talk about the relevance of resume? How relevant is the resume these days, and what would be the best resume to influence you guys to hire someone?
So what would be the, what would be the best sort of way to put together a resume? What could really stand out?
I won't look at resumes anymore.
I spent like 6 weeks creating an infographic resume. I didn't give it to a single person. And I had another comment, but I forgot.
I've seen a lot of resumes. And you can see 2 identical people on paper, and one person could be an amazing entry-level developer and one not so much. It's about putting things on there that mean something to you and then being able to talk about your experiences. A lot of people I said, oh, I was the president of my chapter of blah, blah, blah. And you ask them, oh, how was that for you? And they can't speak to it for more than 5 seconds. To me, that challenges their integrity at the start. So it's not the words, it's not if there's typos, it's not if it's 20 pages, because I've seen everything, and it tells me very little about the individual I'm talking to. It's more about, do they write to me, know who I am, and tell me why they've taken the time to write to me, and what type of person they are, and what's behind those words on a piece of paper. But I agree with Avi, it's kind of a relic of, before there was all this other cool stuff to evaluate people for, like before syllabus.
Or you can make like a Google form that asks unique questions and automatically puts all the answers into a spreadsheet. Like, why do we need resumes when I could just ask you, like, hey, tell me about your favorite TV show in more than 500 words? Like, if I can get that out of someone, I'd much rather read the responses to that than read, like, your objective.
Yeah, I feel pretty much the same way, that I don't, especially for junior developers, I look at the resume, but I don't put a lot of thought into it. It's mostly about once you've actually talked to them, what are they passionate, all the things that we've talked about.
For me, looking at code is more important. I have to see the code. Sometimes the resume looks terrible. I might just skip it just by looking at the resume, but then when I look at the code, I see an incredible difference. So that makes a huge difference. The code is more important. I look at the resumes too.
Great. Any closing statements from anyone on the panel?
Assuming a lot of people here are beginners and just getting into this, after teaching for the last year and a half, I guess one of the things that I really did not expect is the amount of pressure and frustration that you guys put on yourselves while you're trying to learn this stuff. It's so much pressure. You guys are like, I need to understand this today, and if I don't, I'm going to pull out my hair, and it's like, why? Why do you have that? Why are you going through that? Why are you making this process so painful for yourself? This is, there's a joy to this craft. It's not about creating things and the power that gives you and getting money. It's about, this is fun. We like programming. I don't know why, but I like it. I enjoy it. It makes me think about things that I wouldn't think about otherwise. It makes me enjoy life more. And find that. It's gonna be funner if you just let go of the pressure and stop getting frustrated and experience this all as the best thing you can do. This is fun. It should be enjoyable. If it's not, I don't know why you're doing it. Why are you working so hard to get a job that you are gonna hate? If you can't enjoy doing this and going through this process and learning it, then don't do it. It's not, you're learning a skill that you're gonna hate practicing. Yeah, that's what I would say.
I have 3 quick things. First, don't be afraid to open up source code. I think I forked Rubinius, Ruby, and Rails and opened up the source code. Every time I wanted to figure out how something is implemented, especially in Rails, because there's so much DSL in Rails, and it doesn't make a lot of sense to you if you come from just Ruby or a new programmer altogether. So don't be afraid to open up the source code. Read pragmatic thinking and learning, because you're teaching yourself something, so you should know how your brain works. And the pragmatic programmers from Journeyman to Master, amazing book. Read both of those. And then if you're in Ruby, read Eloquent Ruby by Russ Olson. Awesome book. And then the third one is hang out with other programmers. Every chance you get, especially in the Ruby community. I can't speak to other communities, but they're awesome people. Go to conferences, get to know them, make friends in the community, and you'll see, I think, a part of why all of us love programming so much.
I will just say thank you to Aiden for bringing us all together.
Great, thank you. If you are hiring and want to be accosted, maybe stand over in this area. Thanks, guys.